When riding in the sand, the engine runs at a higher RPM and under a lot more load, and therefore runs hotter. This is why carburation is really important. I will now talk through how to set the carburation up properly for riding in the sand. If you have a good carburation setting on a hard track, then you won't be too far away for in the sand. You just need to go slightly richer on the main jet and on the needle. For example, if you have a 178 main jet, then go to a 180. Then on the needle, move the clip down one position. This raises the needle in the carburetor, giving a richer setting. One easy way to see whether you have a good carburation setting is to look at the exhaust. Look in the end, stick your finger in and wipe it. If you have a black sooty colour, then you're not too far away. If you're unsure about your carburation setting, I would recommend you go richer rather than leaner, as going lean can cause damage to the engine. When riding in the sand, especially in the wet, you need to run the chain slightly slacker than usual. When the sand is wet, it gets into the links and causes the chain to tighten. If the chain comes too tight, then it stops the suspension working properly. I recommend that on a bike with a PDS system, you run 4 loose fingers behind the back of the chain guide. On a bike with linkage, this needs to be 3 fingers. If the chain is too tight, then simply slacken the back wheel. Adjust the wheel spacers on both sides to make sure it's even. Then pull up on the chain and tighten the back wheel. This makes sure the axle is centralised. Tighten the lock-off nuts. And then check the tension once again. And now you have a loose 4 fingers, which is correct. In between a race, there's certain checks that I carry out on a bike. The first thing I will do is drain the carburetor. This is done by removing the 17mm float bowl screw. This allows all the fuel to come out of the bottom of the carburetor. Then inspect the bottom of the float bowl screw for any dirt and water. If there is, then clean with contact cleaner and then blow off with an airline if possible. Then replace the screw. Once you thread it back in, give it a little nip with the spanner to make sure it's tight. I'll then go around the bike checking the main nuts and bolts. I'll then look for worn parts, broken parts and cracks on the bike. These are things that can cause a DNF during a race. Here is my checklist for preparing the bike before a race. First, I check the tyres for wear and then also for damage in the sidewalls. Also, if you're running inner tubes, check the tyre pressures. I'll then check front and rear wheel nuts to make sure they're tight. I'll then check the spokes on the wheels. I use this torque wrench from Talon, who make our wheels. Find a start point, then go in a circular direction, not missing a spoke. When you've gone all the way around the wheel and you're satisfied, then it's time to move on to the front wheel and check them also. I'll then check the sprocket nuts. You then need to look at the chain for wear and damage. One area you need to look at if you're using a rivet link. Check the edges to make sure that it's not worn away and the link can't come off. Next is the pinch bolts on the forks. Check both top and bottom triple clamps and also the ones holding the front wheel spindle. I then go to the engine. There is a lot of vibration coming off the engine and this can cause the engine bolts to come loose. I'll then move to the shock bolts. Whilst I'm at the back of the bike, I'll then check the subframe bolts. I'll move back around the bike and check the carburetor clamps. I'll go round the bike checking all the plastics and the seat bolt. Check the fluid and oil levels. Make sure if they're low to top them up, but with the engine oil, do not overfill. Make sure the caps are replaced tightly as well. I'll then inspect the brake pads for wear. If they're too worn, then I'll change them. I'll also then bleed the brakes before the race. Last but not least is the controls on the bike. Check their movement and clean and oil if needed. Also check the cables for damage and wear. One thing that's often forgotten and overlooked is the fuel. Always remember to fill the tank right to the top. Pushing the bike back to the van is not enjoyable. Once all the checks are complete, it's time to go out and ride, and most importantly, have fun.